Hey guys, so this is I think this is the third uh, video in module 1. So we've got one more to go about the tools, but this one is probably one of the biggest ones that's different because we are studying biology. So we're going to get into kind of the meat of what is this thing that we're going to study and how do we know what is life and that kind of stuff. So we're going to kind of walk through this part, and then we'll do a real short session on tools and measurements and things like that. And then this module will be done. So again, like I've said, this module should be pretty quick and easy. This is probably the one that's the section that's not going to be that quick and probably not going to be that easy. So, or that we're not, let's say, not familiar with. I think it'll be easy, but just one of those things we're not familiar with. So, as we talk about this and we talk about life, and I know I made a joke and about life biology. Biology is the study of life, and life stinks sometimes, and that's true. And literally, we're going to find out as we walk through biology that it does stink. And when I was in public school, I would make sure they understand this because some days my room would smell very distinctly of what we were going to do that day. I was real big stickler on making sure we didn't eat in lab if we were doing certain labs. There's certain labs in biology that we can eat in, which is awesome. You couldn't necessarily do that always in physical science, physics, or definitely chemistry. But in biology, there's several labs that we're going to be able to eat in, which is cool. But for the most part, there are some labs that you really can't eat in. Like when we start doing looking at stuff underneath the microscope and looking at critters, we look at bacteria. If we get a chance to look at bacteria underneath a slide and make our own bacteria slides and grow our own bacteria, those could be potential danger to us. And so we don't really eat during those time periods. We also, I'm a big stickler when I was teaching to wash your hands, not only like after lab, but sometimes before lab, because if you're not wearing gloves, sometimes what you got on your hands can taint what you're doing. And a lot of times nowadays we wear gloves, which is very helpful in that in the lab, because then you don't get stained and you don't get stuff on you. But it's still always a good practice to wash your hands, definitely before you go to the bathroom and after you go to the bathroom. It's always a good thing to do that. And we'll talk about some of those things as we get through. So, so the basic idea of life, I mean, everybody's got this picture in their mind. And probably one of the things that came up in your mind about life is probably some kind of critter. Your favorite creature that's on the earth. Now, when we talk about creatures, we can go back to okay. So I want to as we talk about life, let's go back and look at some verses, some general verses, and let's go back and look at Genesis 1. And again, I think we're all should be familiar with Genesis 1. So I just want to talk about life in Genesis 1. So if we look at verse 20, said God said, let the waters well, let's go back because we got to go back to trees. So verse 11, God said, let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit, in which their seed, each according to its kind on the earth. And it was so. And the earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seeds according to their own kinds, and trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed according to its kind. And God saw that it was good, and this was the evening and morning, and this was the third day. So on the third day, he vegetation has arrived. God creates vegetation on the earth, but it's not going to be until the fifth day till we're actually going to see creatures. So on the fourth day, God creates the lights to rule over the day and the night. Okay, so this and he says, let them be for a sign of seasons and for days and years. So he does all the plans, but then he creates the lights to govern everything. Okay, so that's the fourth day. But then on the fifth day, so we already have plants, creatures, critters, whatever, plants of their own kind, trees of their own kind, bearing their own kind, to its kind. And then God says, let the waters swarm with living creatures and let the birds fly above the earth, the expanses of heaven. So great sea creatures, every living thing that moves, with which the waters swarm according to their kinds, every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And he said, he blessed them. And he said, be fruitful, multiply, fill the seeds, fill the earth. And this was the fifth day. Okay. So we get the critters of the air and of the water. And so if you want to say this is the fluid critters, these are the critters that live in the fluidness of the earth, meaning the water and meaning the air, then those are those critters. So that's the fifth day. Okay. So then on the sixth day, here comes everything else. And so God says, let's bring forth living creatures according to their kind. So he says livestock, creepy things, and beast. So there's three groups. And when we talk about taxonomy here after the first of the year, we're as far as like critters go, where do we put them? God only puts them kind of in five places. First the plants, and then the critters of the water, the critters of the air, and then livestock, creepy things, and beast. Okay, um, so we talk about the beginnings of taxonomy. This is where we were getting stuff. We were kind of lumping them into those groups. But we do know now that some birds don't fly, and we know that there are some critters that do fly, like a bat, which um, and are not a bird. So there are some, there are some distinctions now people get hung up on, but God puts them into these groups as He's creating them. So God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, the livestock according to their kinds, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. And God saw it was good. And then we know that in this verse, God talks about making man, and now man's different. So he makes all those other things, but now he says, let us make man in our image after our likeness. Okay, so all the other things are not in God's likeness, not in his image. They are not Imago Dei. We are Imago Dei. We humans, mankind, meaning all of us, males and females, because he said, let us make mankind, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the heavens, over the livestock, and over all the earth, every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. And so God created man in his own image. He created him male and female. He created them. So him, mankind, specific males and females, and he created them, all of them. Okay? And this is a very general term because he's going to get specific in the next chapter about how he made Adam, and Adam means human. And so when we look at that, he gets very specific on how he made males and made females. Okay, so but that's for the next chapter. We're just talking generally about life. Okay, and God said, be fruitful and multiply, subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the heaven, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. And he said, I give you, this is in the beginning, we were vegetarians. I give you every plant to yield seed on the face of the earth, and every tree its fruit, and you shall have them for food. And every beast of the earth, and every bird of the heavens, to everything that creeps upon the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food. And it was so. And so God had made everything, and behold, it was very good. And in the evening and morning, this is the sixth day. So we're talking about life. God created it. And the first one's and we got to talk about fruit doesn't fall into, all right, so plants do not fall into this breath of life. He says every beast of the earth, every bird of heavens, everything that creeps upon the earth, everything that has the breath of life. Okay, so he says, I've given you the green plants for food. So plants, you can hug a tree if you want to. We often make the statement, we like to hug little trees because we believe in cutting trees. We believe in managing our forests for the creatures. And I think that says something about what God's given us dominion over this, that we should take care of it. And that's what we believe. But plants aren't going to hug you back. Plants are not going to do any of that. So as far as life goes, they are living, but they don't have the breath of life. So there's a very distinction between the two. There's a very distinction between the breath of life creatures and his own image, us, mankind. Okay, so as we talk about life, this is where we get it from the beginning, and this is going to get a little lengthy, and I'm going to apologize ahead of time. So we also want to look at what God told Noah. So because everything changed once the flood happened, as far as on the earth. And so God tells him and his son, Noah and his sons, to be fruitful and multiply. The fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon the beasts of the earth and upon every bird of heaven, upon every thing that creeps on all the ground and all the fish of the sea. Into your hands they are delivered. Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. And as I gave you green plants, I give you everything. And so now everything is what we're going to eat. Okay, so now we're just not eating plants, we're eating everything. And now everything is pretty much going to eat everything. But you shall not eat the flesh with its life, that is the blood. And for your lifeblood, I will require a reckoning. From every beast, I will require it, and from man. And from his fellow man, I will require a reckoning for the life of man. So whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. For God made man in his own image. Okay, so again, we're looking, God's reaffirming that he made mankind in his own image, and that we're different from the rest of the living creatures. And if we go on back through 8 and 9, we're going to see he's going to give a covenant to Noah and his offsprings, that every creature that is with you, birds, livestock, every beast of the earth, as many as came out of the ark, for every beast of the earth, he says, I establish a covenant that he's not going to cut flesh off by the flood again, by water again. And again, he made a covenant with every living creature and all future generations. Okay, and he put, of course, a rainbow in the sky to remind us of this, and that's what the rainbow is about. Rainbow is about God's covenant with Noah, God's covenant with the animals of the earth, that he's not going to destroy it by a flood again. So anyway, so kind of getting the covenant. I want to also share. I don't know. Did I press start? Okay. I also want to share with you guys a little bit of what David says in Psalm 8, and again, just kind of reaffirm to you all what we all know about man. And so just look at verse 5. Yet you have made him a little lower than the heavenly beings and crowned him with glory and honor. You have given him dominion over the works of your hands. You have put all things under his feet, all sheep and oxen, and also the beasts of the field, the birds of heaven and the fish of the sea, whatever passes along the paths of the sea. O Lord, O our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. Okay, so as we talk about life, we can talk about the plants, which don't have the breath of life. We can talk about the creatures that he made, the air creatures, the water creatures, the creatures that crawl upon the land, that creepeth on the land, the creatures that, the beasts of the land, the livestock of the land, and we can also talk about the ones that are made in his image, which is mankind. And so there is a distinction as far as life is concerned, but as far as life is concerned, we can look at several things that we all have in common. We have this commonality in all of us. This design that God designed us, created us, works. Okay, and it works together in harmony. Well, for the most part, in harmony until man decides it's going to interrupt it with all the earth. Okay, so I guess let's get on into the meat of this. One of the things that we find out that all life, plant life, animal life, human life, are all composed of cells. And so this cell is the basic structure and function for all living things. So everything happens inside the cell for the most part. Now, there are going to be things that we get to in module, I think it's module 8 or 9, that we're going to deal with after the first year, that we're going to talk about viruses. We're going to talk about bacteria, and there are going to be some things that maybe don't fit into the cell theory. Viruses don't necessarily fit into cell theory. So we're going to deal with that when we get there. But we're going to have a whole module, module 4, I think it is, devoted to cells. So where we study cells, where we study what's going on in the cell. Because if we understand the cell, then we can understand a lot of the things that go on in life. So pretty much every living creature either is made up of a cell or made up of multiple cells, and that's where we're going to get unicellular, having one, cellular consisting of cells. We're going to see, we talk about cells again, we're going to probably meet a guy by the name of Robert Hooke, however you want to say his name, and he coined the term cell, where this cell is a small compartment cavity, bound space, and he gets it from looking at a monastery where the monks lived in the monastery, and in their cell had everything that they needed. Okay, and that's where we get the term cell from. Most of our critters that we see with our naked eye are multicellular, which means they have more than one cell. And we're going to see when we get to cells that we can get even more complicated into tissues and organ systems and organisms. Okay, so we're going to get more complicated when we get into module 4. So here you can see the Spirogyrus, like really cool algae in its one cell. And actually, Spirogyrus, there's multiple cells, but they're not dependent on each other. They're independent of each other. This is a diatom, I think. It's actually a desmond, which is a type of diatom, but it's green, and all the things that are green, of course, are photosynthetic, and we're going to deal with that. So it's one cell. We got Chlamydomonas, this is electron microscope picture, and it's one cell, but it has everything in it to functions. And then this is sea lettuce, in which you can eat it basically, and it's kind of tasty. You wouldn't necessarily put it in your salad, but it's a type of seaweed, and you can eat it, and it's multicellular. And then of course all of our critters over here are multicellular, and we're going to look at these after the first of the year and get a little bit more in depth on them. So this first part of the semester, our first semester, we're going to deal with the things that work in life. So we're going to deal with cells, we're going to deal with genetics, next chapter we're going to deal with chemistry. Module 3, we're going to deal with ecology, which is kind of a little bit out of sorts. When I talk about it, we'll talk about it. I don't really like kind of talking about it now, but this is where our author of this book puts it. So we're going to do it in module 3. So it's going to fit. It's going to be good. And I think ecology is one of those things I think we all got kind of a little bit of a handle on, because we live in this world. Especially where we live in the rural area, we have hunters, we have farmers, we have livestock. It's there. So we're going to see it. So next one, all creatures grow and develop. Now, the big difference of this is growth and development is growth just means to increase in size, and development means you change. And the biggest things that we can talk about is metamorphosis. And of course, this is the butterfly, where it goes from an egg to a totally eating stage where it has no competition on the adult stage. Then it goes into a dormant stage, a chrysalis, where this worm-looking like critter turns into something really beautiful and magnificent. Pretty cool. Frogs are cool too, because we see a frog goes from an egg to a tadpole. Again, the tadpole's not really competing on the adult frog, what they eat. They compete with each other, but necessarily with the adult frog. And we see that this tadpole grows legs, loses his tail, and eventually hops out of the mud. Now, if you've never had any of those two, never kept the chrysalis to see what it would turn into, never ever had tadpoles and see them development, then you're missing out. And that's something that after actually right now we probably can find some chrysalises, and if I do find some chrysalises, I'll bring them in for us. But in the springtime we can come back and maybe get some tadpoles and kind of look at them, because they are really cool to see them develop. If you've never done that as a kid, you might want to try to talk your mom into that in the springtime, because it is really a super neat thing. it is also super smelly and can be super gross if you don't change the water correctly. So growth and development, another one of those things that life has to do. We have to grow. We have to get increase in size, increase in number, our cells, and then we have to develop. We have to change. Biblically, we do that. Paul talks about being babies and drinking milk, but now we're not. So we grow up, we develop our knowledge of Bible, of theology. So again, it kind of fits everything. So growth and development. The other thing that we're going to talk about is metabolism. We're really going to kind of hit on it next chapter when we talk about chemistry, because we're going to talk about some processes that we have to have. We have to get energy. And so when we talk about all of this getting energy, that's the total processes. It's called metabolism. Okay. And so we got to have an organism that convert energy and matter from outside sources and use that energy matter to sustain life. We got to make new cells. We got to grow in development, and it takes energy to do that. So for us, that's eating matter, eating food, taking it in, and doing digestion and having cellular respiration. And we're going to deal with all of that specifics. This is again kind of some general stuff, and then we get very, very specific as we get along. So again, these words kind of commit to memory. And you think of metabolism, and I think we all in our day and age of diets and eating right and keto stuff and just all the stuff that's out there, I think we have an idea of metabolism. We totally kind of know this. So this shouldn't be a new term for us. Now, the next two terms might be a little new for us, okay? The first term is anabolism, meaning that we're going to use energy and simple compounds to produce large chemicals in large structure. So these are the process that build things. So anabolic metabolism. Okay, so this is the stuff that builds things. The other one is catabolism. I don't know why that showed up orange, but this is the process that breaks things down. So ana means to build, cat means to break. Okay, so breaking it up, producing energy, and we're going to deal with this because we got two processes: photosynthesis and respiration. Photosynthesis makes things, cellular respiration breaks up things to give us energy. And so again, we're gonna get a little bit more specific. So metabolism, there's two just basic processes, anabolism and catabolism. Okay, so anabolism takes the energy in substances and makes molecules. Catabolism takes these things and breaks them down. Okay, so that's very easy to think about. So metabolism, we got to build them and then we got to break them. So that's all metabolic functions. Okay, and so here kind of gets a little bit more specific, so you can kind of see we take in food, we get proteins, complex carbohydrates, triglycerides, and we're going to deal with all of these in module 2. So don't freak out. I can't remember. We're going to remember this next semester. Not next semester, but next module. So one of the things about biology, everything builds on everything else. Isn't like physical science where we learn physics and we learn chemistry, and sometimes they don't ever cross over. Biology, what we learn right now, builds on what we're going to use and talk about later. So this is going to give us a little introduction. Okay, so you can see this. So the catabolic reactions, the tearing up stuff, is in the blue, and in the green is the anabolic reaction. So we're going to deal with this, and not only that, but we're going to get real specific in a chapter of their own, and we're going to deal with photosynthesis, and we're going to deal with respiration. Okay, so photosynthesis uses light to synthesize, to combine and make chemical process. Well, basically, photosynthesis makes sugars and gives us oxygen in the air. And we're going to talk about this. Now, we won't talk about this until I think module 5, which I wish, in my view, probably we should talk about that way before we talk about ecology, because ecology is photosynthesis and cellular respiration at work in our environment. So, but it's okay. We can come back and talk about it. We'll get real specific. We're just going to introduce you to them right now. Cellular respiration. Oops. So here is a link to all of photosynthesis and respiration, so you guys can see the link and kind of talk about it. There's the picture that I use, and so it gets a little bit more specific for you. Okay. So as we talk about cellular respiration, we can talk about two types of critters, and I missed one, I think. So let me go back. So photosynthesis, we have critters called autotrophs, and we're going to deal with these again when we get to photosynthesis. Autotrophs, auto means automatically. Trophs means feeding, so you automatically feed. You automatically make your own food. Okay, that's autotrophs. So that's pretty much all the green plants can do that. Anything that pretty much is green is going to do that. Now we've got some others, some exceptions to the plants. We got some exceptions to the protists, and we have some fungi that are exceptions, and to the heterotroph stuff. So we'll get there next module. Don't worry about it now. We're just giving you the basics. We can talk about cellular respiration, and everybody does cellular respiration, even autotrophs. Okay, but we're gonna have very specific um, critters that are consumers that are going to eat things. And so these are called heterotrophs. Heterotrophs, hetero means other, troph means feeder. We already mentioned that word. So we got herbivores that eat plants. We got carnivores that are meat eaters. We got omnivores that eat everything. And we get these little things called detritivores, which are debris eaters. Okay, and so this is like leaf matter. This is worms. These are snails. These are some bacteria. Most of your bacteria kind of follow here. Some of our protists follow here. This is fungi, follow here. So they fall in that category. And so you're going to look at different types of heterotrophs. What's a heterotroph? Here's a whole video. This is coming from tutors.com. And again, if you're struggling, these are all good places to go to find help. So we look at all of that. All of that has to be done so that we can maintain homeostasis. Now, homeostasis means like, and stasis means a period of inactivity or equilibrium. So let's talk about this, because we like to stay in balance. Our body likes to stay in balance. The ecosystem likes to stay in some kind of balance. But now when we say balance or we say equilibrium, I want you guys, let me go back one. I want you guys to understand that equilibrium here is not an A, it's an I. Okay? So it doesn't necessarily mean you get $100, I get $100. It's going to mean that the rate of exchange is the same. You're earning $50, I'm earning $50. Okay? The case in point here is blood sugar. So when our blood sugar increases, the liver's going to store it and use it as glycogen. But when our blood sugar returns to 0.1%, and if it gets lower, then we're going to need it. So homeostasis, so we try to stay this 0.1%. Now, if it decreases, we go to the liver, we convert glycogen to glucose, and we put it back out. Now, of course, we all know this is done by different hormones that we're going to talk about later in some other modules. But this is a basic thing. Okay, we're going to maintain this level. Again, this is not zero. It's not a zero level. One of the best examples is thermoregulation, which is keeping our body temperature at that 98.6 degrees. So if our body temperatures decrease, then we shiver. Okay, and what happens is our blood pools to the inside of our bodies, and that's why you kind of turn blue sometimes. You shiver, and because you're shivering and your blood goes to the middle of your body, your blood can get warmer. Your body gets warmer, temperature increases, and you come back to 98.6 degrees. Okay, if you stay this far, then your body starts doing some things to try to maintain homeostasis. A lot of times, what happens is you pass out. So your body can go into this state of where it doesn't have to take in all the stimuli around that's going around outside you. It can concentrate on what's going on inside you and getting your body warmer. Okay, so that's one of the things. The other thing is your extremities, and we can talk about frostbite, where your extremities will be lost because your blood's not going to go there. So your blood's going to pull more to the inside of your body, to where your heart, your lungs, all of that has to maintain that, has to maintain your brain. to have all the functions. So again, your body's going to do what it has to do to maintain homeostasis. Now, if your body increases, okay, you start sweating. The other thing that happens is your face gets real red, and what happens is the blood starts to come to your skin so that it can release the temperature. Now, one of the cool things is we're going to learn about water next chapter, and you learned about it in physical science, so you probably already know this. When you sweat, the water takes the heat with it. So it actually cools your body down. And so sweating is a good thing. Okay? Yes, sweating is a good thing. And it decreases your body temperature and it returns to normal. Now, problems with sweating is you can oversweat. So you can lose too much water. Okay? Or you don't sweat. So you can have, heat exhaustion and heat frustration. Anyway, those are all bad too. And again, your body's going to do what it's got to do to keep you from overheating, to maintain homeostasis. Okay, so again, this is probably the best example of maintaining homeostasis. There's a whole bunch. Your body does a whole lot of things in maintain homeostasis. Okay, and so here is a feedback loop. Negative feedback loops mean that it involves a response that reverses the change and to where it gets the effects. Positive feedback loops reinforce the chain of it. And the best example of a positive feedback loop is oxytocin. Because once oxytocin is produced, the baby is going to be born. Okay? Everything's going to be set in motion that baby's going to be born. And so a lot of times women that need to go full term, they'll give medicine that prevents that from happening. And or if they need to induce childbirth, they'll give the mom oxytocin. Okay, so this is the best positive feedback loops. Most all the other ones are negative feedback loops. So what happens causes a response, and that response causes a change. And once it reaches this equilibrium again, then it stops it. Okay, so that's most of all the loops that are within us. Okay, so pretty neat. So within this, we got to talk about ectotherms and endotherms, and we pretty much know these. Ectotherms are what we refer to as cold-blooded. The ecto is external, and therm is the quality of heat. So they've got to get their heat from outside. They're dependent on the environment. They usually have a low metabolism. And again, we're going to see, I mean, if you're, definitely if you're from Florida, or if you have reptiles, you know this. The warmer they are, the more active that they're going to be. And actually, they can overheat, so they have to get cool too. So that's why that a lot of times you'll see alligators on the shore, but then they'll move into the water to get cooler again. And again, that's why we see fish migrate. That's all that kind of stuff. Now, our endotherms means it is internal in the quality of heat. We maintain our body temperature, and we're going to talk about these critters after the first of the year, but we're going to kind of introduce you to these two terms. Now, there are fish who are ectotherms, but then there are fish who are kind of endotherms. Now, they control their body a little bit different than what we're going to consider males do. They don't shiver, they don't sweat, but they do have some internal control. Great whites, they found out, do. They know that mako sharks can. They know that, I think, swordfish and the marlins can all do that. All the fish who have to migrate to feed in the colder waters can do that. A little different, but still wouldn't necessarily call them necessarily an ectotherm. Okay. So the next one that we got to talk about is that we got to respond to stimuli. Okay. So this goes along with homeostasis, like I said right here. Okay. So there are receptors. We have special structures that allow for us to understand our internal and our external environment. Okay, and this is again goes along with homeostasis. We're going to maintain this homeostasis, so we're going to have those receptors. Now, ability to respond to a stimulus called irritability, and that I just threw in there to talk about. We talked about positive feedback loops and negative feedback loops. We can talk about reflexes, neurons, and types of stimuli. Okay, so we have to have receptors to respond to our environment. It's really cool if you've ever seen an octopus. They respond to the environment by turning the color of their surroundings so they can hide. Again, just different kind of receptors. We don't do that, okay? But we do have receptors. One of the things we can talk about is like drinking. So if we're thirsty, our eyes see water, the stimulus is water, our response is to drink. We've got motor neurons, we've got sensory neurons. Don't freak out. You don't have to know all this right now. We're just kind of showing you this because we're going to talk about it again later, that we have receptors to be able to respond to our environment. Okay. Let's go back a little. Well, so now we're back to the page. So we're going to get more specific as we go on. So far we've talked about a lot of different things. We've talked about cells. We talked about metabolism. We talked about maintaining homeostasis. We talked about sensory. We have receptors. All animals have receptors. Even plants have these receptors. Now, again, they don't have a brain. A lot of critters don't have a brain. But so a lot of times it is a reflex. And I wish we kind of talked about reflexes in here, but anyway, reflex to move. Plants move towards the light to get the optimum light for photosynthesis. And I think I'll take you out maybe the first day and kind of look at that and talk about that. And especially there's a couple plants that are on the campus of the church that we can actually see some really cool things happen. And again, but a response is to maintain homeostasis. Okay. Now the next one we're going to talk about, and you already saw it, and the next one we're going to talk about is DNA reproduction. So critters have to reproduce its like kind. We already saw that in Genesis. We said, God said, go and produce of its kind, its like kind. So there are two basic reproduction types. There's the first one's asexual. A means without. Again, not being, not having two parents. I think it's a general good term to say. So this is a process by a single organism produces a genetically identical organism. Okay, and we'll look at that in a little specific here in just a second. Sexual reproduction, you get two parents, you produce very different, genetically different offspring. And this genetic combination comes from DNA of the two parents. Okay, and we're going to say parents, but we're going to see that some creatures like sponges, when we talk about males producing sperm and females producing eggs, sponges, it kind of looks alike, and they both swim, the egg. And so anyway, it's weird. They're sponges. They're not humans. Okay, humans are very different in that. So we'll deal with that and talk about that as we get going. Mitosis, as we have parent cell, goes through division, so divides, and we get two daughter cells. Now, don't freak out. We're going to do mitosis again. We get into DNA. Okay, so if you just know that mitosis is about one cell, splits in half, the two daughter cells look just like each other, we're good with that. Okay. Asexual reproduction. Here's the different types of asexual reproduction. Plants reproduce by runners. This is kudzu. Believe it or not, kudzu does not produce sexually. It produces asexually. So all kudzu is genetically identical. They send out these runners along the ground. Most of our grasses is that way. Strawberries are that way. We have bulbs, onions. That's why you can cut the top of an onion off, put it back in the ground, and it'll grow that bulb. Okay, that's genetically identical to the bulb that you just used to eat. Okay, we could talk about tubers, and that's potatoes. And you can kind of see the tubers are all coming off one plant. They're all genetically identical. Bad news about genetically identical things: if a disease comes through and kills everything that possesses that genetics, then they're gone. Okay, because they're genetically identical. Fragmentation is when it pops off. And I don't think a good fragmentation picture is a sea starfish, where you cut them up into different halves, so different pieces, and each piece will grow a new starfish. We're going to see this with flatworms. You can cut them up and they'll grow into a new flatworm. Regeneration is also with starfish, and they regenerate and grow a new one. And then, of course, cloning. All cloning that has happened is identical of the original cell. So Dolly, the clone sheep, yes, look just like Molly, the mom. Okay. Sexual reproduction comes. We have an egg and we have an ovum. We have a sperm, and they join together and they form a zygote, and then this zygote forms an embryo. So you can see where and this is meiosis, where we get 23 chromosomes from mom and 23 chromosomes from dad, and when they combine, we come back to 46 chromosomes. Now again, don't freak out. We're going to deal with this in genetics. We get closer to the end of the semester, and we're going to spend, I think, 2 chapters there, 2 modules there with genetics. So don't freak out. We'll get there. You just understand that sexual reproduction is fusion from an egg and a sperm coming together. You get a new genetic combination, then yay. Okay, then that's awesome. That's all you really kind of need to know and understand for right now. Okay, so when we talk about genetics, we could talk about this inheritance, which is the process by which physical and biological characteristics are transmitted from parent or parents, so that's misspelled, to the offspring. Okay. And then we could talk about mutations, and mutations are abrupt, marked change in DNA of an offspring compared to its parents. And we'll get more into this when we get into genetics, and we'll talk more about mutations. Actually, we'll talk about it a lot when we talk about our last module where we're dealing with evolution. So, and what we know about mutations and what they say about mutations. And so we're gonna deal with all that. So just understand, you can get a grasp of the terminology. Awesome. And even if you can't like grasp it fully right now, we're gonna come back to it and we're gonna put more links on it. So it's like we're building the shelf right now, and so we're gonna stick stuff on it. Or we've got a hanger, we're building the hanger, and we're gonna hang stuff on it. So just kind of grasp a little bit of the terminology, and we're gonna add more to it as we go. So if you understand the basic stuff, awesome, and we're going to add to it. Okay. So the on your own questions were list the criteria of all living organisms, and if you were taking a secular course, there would be more of them, because really they go into a little bit, because you got to add evolution, but we're not adding evolution. Okay, so to this, because God created the world. So, and we just talked about God created all the kinds and mankind. So the criteria we're going to use is on page 16 in figure 1.8. So cells, growth and development, metabolism and energy, homeostasis, response to stimuli, and DNA reproduction. Okay, so those are the big things that the 6 big things that we're going to talk about, criteria for life. And we get to, after the first year, we talk about bacteria and viruses. Do they fit this criteria, and do they fit all of it, or just parts of it? So we'll deal with that again. And like I said, we learn a little bit here. We're going to use it all the way through. 1.8 says a biologist studies an organism and then 2 of its offspring. They are identical in every possible way. If they're identical in every possible way, then it's got to be asexual reproduction. Okay. They look exactly alike. Okay. How are unicellular and multicellular organisms alike, and how are they different? Well, they're alike in that they got to do all the functions of life, but they're different in whether you do it in the one cell or you do it through many cells. Okay, so hopefully you got the basics of life, and then the creation connection that's on page 23 talks about, and again, we've talked about Genesis 1:20 through 27, and we talked about, God creating a mankind in his own image. But go back to Genesis real quick here. But we know that God created the creatures according to its kind. Okay, so again, according to their kind. So a bird doesn't, regardless of what anybody says, a bird does not become a reptile. Bird eggs hatch into very specific birds. Okay, we're getting to a unique bird, and you guys probably have seen this bird, a cowbird, who takes advantage of other birds and lay their eggs in the other bird's nest, and that mom has to hatch that egg, and then that baby pushes out all her babies, the mom's baby, and the mom takes care of this baby that's not hers. So very interesting critters out there. I think those kind of critters kind of makes you go, interesting. Um, think about the duckbill platypus. Those critters were created. They got a duck, like a bill of a duck. They got a spine on them that's like a snake poison kind of thing, and they've got fur, so they're mammals, and they lay eggs, but they also nurse their babies. So again, but they produce after their own kind. A duckbill platypus's egg's not going to hatch into a bird. Okay, it's going to hatch into a duckbill platypus. Okay, snake eggs are going to hatch into whatever snakes that they're going to be. Which, FYI for you guys, most poisonous snakes have live birth. Okay, so they don't actually lay eggs. Okay, so just a sidebar information there for you guys. So when we've talked about the creation connection. So we're more than a bunch of chemicals. We're more than that because God created us after each of our own kind, and mankind is made in the image of God. Okay, so we're more than the chemicals that we're made of. So hopefully you enjoyed this section. Hopefully it's not too long. I'm really trying to make these short, less than 30 minutes. Sometimes it doesn't get that way because there's a lot of good stuff to talk about. But I'm trying to give you that, chunk it so that you get some information that as you're reading it kind of, hopefully this helps put some stuff together for you guys. Okay, so this is the part about life. The next part that we're going to talk about is going to be the tools, and it should be pretty short. Okay, thank you for listening. Appreciate it.